All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Olka Joshi Hansen. I'm co-interim executive director here at Grantmakers for Education and chief program officer. I want to welcome you on behalf of our team and thank you for joining us today for the third in a series that we have been doing in partnership with Council on Foundations and Hispanics in Philanthropy on raising the bar, really focused on the U.S. Department of Education's current priorities and having funder briefings and conversations that kind of help funders understand what the administration's priorities are and how we can support them. So today we've got a great team from the Department of Education to join us, and we are going to be moderated by Callie Riley, who is Senior Program Officer of Education at the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies. I will hand it over to her. Thank you so much to Dr. Futrell, to Katie, and to Callie.
Thanks so much, Olka. I'm really glad to be here today with everyone. So as we all know, the past few years have been anything but ordinary in our world of education. We also know that great leaders are essential to ensuring that students feel affirmed and have a sense of belonging in our schools. And the diversity of these leaders should reflect the diversity of the students they serve, ultimately setting up our students to be successful. And sadly, one of the challenges that the pandemic has exacerbated is how we staff our schools, especially with respect to critical workers like teachers and mental health professionals. At Schusterman Family Philanthropies, our education's team mission is to support efforts to ensure Black and Latino students from low-income backgrounds can access grade-level affirming, engaging, and meaningful K-12 education that empowers them to achieve social and economic liberation. And one way we do this is by focusing on preparing, developing, and retaining a diverse and skilled educator workforce. And we feel strongly that strategies like ongoing funder collaboration, setting up grantees to unlock federal dollars to support such efforts are critical. Thus, I am delighted that GFE invited me to be here in community with you all to speak more to this issue and solutions by moderating a conversation with the U.S. Department of Education's Dr. Bernadine Futrell, Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, and Catherine Neese, Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. So with that, I'll ask Bernadine to kick off the presentation before we move into discussion and questions from you for our panelists. I do encourage everyone to please put questions in the chat as they arise, and we will do our best to get to all of them. So thank you so much, Bernadine.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that introduction, and really to all of you for being here today, having the conversation and creating the conditions where we can engage and share. So I'm very excited about the conversation, excited to co-present with my colleague, Katie Neese. And before kind of jumping into the conversation, I want to just lay out a few areas regarding the department's priorities or strategies when it comes to raising the bar, recruiting, retaining, and diversifying the school professional workforce. So with that said, I'm going to kind of kick off a little bit with something that I know this group is familiar with because their secretary joined you all. It's the notion of raising the bar. Our secretary issued a call to action to say, it's time to be bold, it's time to stretch, it's time to do the work right now in a unified way, in a way that identifies what's effective on the ground for our children and our families, and also ways that we can stretch and really raise the bar when it comes to what we expect of ourselves as leaders, as educators, as parents, but also what we expect from the precious children and students enrolled in our schools daily. Within Raise the Bar, there are a few pillars, and one of which that I'm going to talk a little bit about today is raise the bar to boldly improve learning conditions. And what that means is to ensure that every child has the conditions where they can learn, they can thrive, they can kind of reach for whatever they want, right? Like that's our job as educators, to clear the way. And as a Department of Education, we have a unique role where we can provide funding that can be a catalyst for that work. We also have, our voice that we can lift up. But it's so important to be in rooms, be it virtual like this, to talk with those who can help elevate, who can kind of lock elbows with us as we do this work together. I enter this role and every role with the hat of being a parent. I'm a parent of a third grader. Well, excuse me, she's going to the fourth grade and my son is going to middle school. And every time I start the conversation, I'm thinking about the fact that my daughter, who was in kindergarten, when the world shut down, March 2020, she was in kindergarten. It was her first year. We were excited. We prepared since she was born for her to go to kindergarten, and then for kindergarten to be completely disrupted and changed. First grade, she was able to go to school virtually like so many children, isolated. Second grade was kind of a first year, but it was also a year of unknowns. Your best friends, your teachers, the people that you establish relationships with would be gone for weeks at a time because of the various COVID measures. Now, this third grade year was so special, not only because she had the most amazing educator in the room, but because it was a year where they were able to kind of be a little more settled, a year where everybody worked around the clock to identify what was family and child centered and effective. And that was the work that I was able to witness as a parent first, and then to be in this role thinking about what we mean when we say we're going to raise the bar to boldly improve learning conditions. To me, that means ensuring that we have educators who are well supported, well prepared, and can lead with the passion that they already have. My daughter was fortunate to have, I think, the best third grade teacher ever, Miss Steiner. So if you meet her, let her know that I'm telling the world about her. And I share so many stories about Miss Steiner. And it was the last day of school when I asked my daughter, what did you love the most? And she said she made learning fun. She always had a new story. And oh, by the way, yesterday, her dad zoomed in and taught us a lesson on superheroes. My mouth is open and wide because that's the type of engagement we want. We want kids to be so excited about learning and so connected and feel so comfortable and supported. And that's what we mean when we say conditions for learning. So how do we get there? As a department, we are looking at leveraging multiple ways, but really to eliminate the educator shortage for every school by ensuring that schools are appropriately staffed, they're paying educators competitively, and we're strengthening pathways into the profession. For us, it's not what or when or how, we have to do it all together, and we have to do it in a unified fashion. And so the department has a few key strategies that I just want to lift up to kind of set the table for some of the discussions that we'll have in order to address this goal. The first is stabilizing the profession. With $122 billion in ARP ESSER funds available to support the profession, we know on our end, there's an opportunity for us to better clarify how these funds are being used, can be used, and also where it may not be able to be used, so that partners like you can help us really paint the full picture of what schools can do. The second is to improve teacher compensation and working conditions and promote career ladders for teachers. We have dynamic grants that I'm honored to be in the role of grant administration for the department within our P through 12 grants that can help to do this work. The other strategy or lever that I'm spending a lot of my time on, and I know this conversation will be about, is promoting educator diversity, really ensuring that there's educators in the classrooms that not only reflect and that students can see themselves and have models, but really educator diversity to help prepare our students for the world, prepare our students for engaging in diverse conversations, innovation, creativity, all those things that come with being in diverse communities. And so as we think about that, we are trying to really, one, study what that means, what that looks like. We know the end goal, we know the numbers and the metrics and the shortage areas, but we want to also better understand from our educators and from partners like you is what is that thing around educator diversity the department can get behind. This fall, we're going to have our Teach to Lead convening that we host twice a year. We did one in March, and we're going to do another one in October, where we're going to bring in groups of educators to come and help us unpack this essential question. We're going to also include a national conference where we're going to bring in key voices such as those from HBCUs and others who have a long-standing history and commitment to supporting effective, diverse educators. And then finally, the final three we have that are closely aligned with our grant programs is our efforts to support new teacher induction and ongoing professional learning. We'll talk a little bit about apprenticeships if we have time, as well as high quality, affordable educator preparation programs, our teacher school leader incentive grants, as well as leveraging partnerships to support teacher recruitment. Now with that, just for visual, I just want to list a few of the grants that we do have. If you want to screenshot it, or folks can have this slide, but these are a few of the grants that we have that do support educator preparation and retention and recruitment. And one of the goals that I have in this role is to make it more clear, make it more easy, make it more accessible, how these funds can be used to do things that are outside of the box, that are innovative, as well as how to lift up things to make it easier for districts, community organizations to do this work. Because what I found from this role, as well as my previous role at AASA and other associations, is the fact that there are a lot of great ideas, but whether or not you can do it and how to do it and how to mix and blend funds is the gap that we want to fill, particularly in this role at the Department of Education. With that, I'm pleased to turn it over to my dear colleague, Katie Neese, to pick it up from here. Thank you.
Yay, there we go. Good morning or good afternoon, and I'm glad to be with you. So building on of what Bernadine said, one of the things that we are working on as part of Raise the Bar is to improve the mental well-being of not only our students, but our faculty. And one of the data points we are using for this work is the most recent Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Youth Behavioral Risk Survey, which gave the department and gave the education system really three sets of marching orders. One is to increase a connectedness at school across all grades and for all youth. When we talk about connectedness, it's knowing that when you're at school, there's somebody who cares about you, whether you're being part of a team or a club or doing volunteer work or have a member of your school, one of the adults who's looking out for you. Two is to increase access to needed services by improving the ability for schools to deliver school-based health services and connecting youth and their families to community-based care that probably would otherwise be inaccessible to them. And then three, to implement high-quality health education for all grades. I think one of the things we've seen over these past several years is there's some basic things that all of us have struggled with in terms of getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, getting some exercise, and how those things really do play a central role in how we feel and how we engage with others. But the bottom line of the CDC's report is that schools are the gateway to needed services for many young people. So if we accept that as a premise, how are we doing? And this data come from the Kaiser Family Foundation, which talks about the shortage of mental health staff that are working in schools, the shortage of funding, and the concerns about, okay, if we could get the people, how do we pay for it? And how do we connect with services in the community? So these two sort of ways of thinking have influenced our work here at the department. And we have three overarching policy goals. One, to increase the skill and knowledge of professionals who are currently working in the schools. And that's both educators as well as support personnel. We want to increase the supply of mental health professionals who can work with students and be a resource for the whole school. And we want to increase funding through the Medicaid program to support school health and mental health services. And this is part of the administration's whole of government approach, which really is focusing on three pillars: to build and strengthen systems capacity, to connect people to care, to create a continuum of support. You probably all seen very recently the several advisories from the Surgeon General, one talking about loneliness, and loneliness as being as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The need for connectedness and the need for us to recognize and try to reduce the stigma of people that are having mental health concerns. And again, I've already talked about the CDC reports and their guidance to schools. So the American Rescue Plan allowed for a portion of its funds to go to kind of systems development. And what I have here are three examples of what states have done with those funds. DC directed $1 million to educator wellness and technical assistance grants. Again, one of the things that we have learned very clearly is that if the adults in the building are not well, they are not able to effectively meet the needs of their students the way they want to. And so we want to change that dynamic. In the state of Illinois, they've directed $23.5 million to launch a resilience education to achieve community health, an initiative, and establish 7 regional social and emotional learning hubs. And again, these are to increase not only the capacity of their staff, but the well-being of their staff so that they can deliver high quality academic supports to their students. And the state of Iowa also committed a significant amount of money, $20 million, to support partnerships with the University of Iowa College of Education to develop leaders who can understand how we can meld education and mental health services on behalf of our nation's students. So we can go to the next slide. So under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is a year old, I believe this week, which is kind of mind-blowing, the Department of Education, and Bernadine has led most of this work. We had 3 major grant programs, but on the personnel side, we've awarded $280 million across 264 states and school districts in 31 states that will add 14,000 mental health professionals to schools. And these are under the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant and the Mental Health Services Professional Demonstration Grant. The first one is really how do we build the skill and capacity of people who are already employed in schools. And the second is really that pipeline. How do we get more people with the credentials they need to be delivering mental health services in schools? The second big bucket of money is $1 billion that's gone to state departments of education for our Stronger Connections program. And this is we allocate funds to states, and then states do a competitive process with the school districts. And what we understand that most school districts are using these funds either to increase the knowledge and skill of their existing workforce, to hire more people, or on activities and strategies that will improve the physical safety of schools. So we can go to the next one. Also under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the department's awarded $86 million through the Promise Neighborhood and the Full Service Community Schools. And most recently, we've been working with the Department of Health and Human Services on 2 activities designed to make it easier for schools to get reimbursed through the Medicaid program for health and mental health services. On May 18th, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services published a comprehensive guide on Medicaid and school-based services. And then just this past Friday, a corresponding technical assistance center was launched. And that's really designed to provide technical assistance to state departments of education, school districts, and state Medicaid agencies on how they really can work together. We know that about 41 million children are covered by the Medicaid program, and they represent about 55% of all kids in school. So we want these kids who are already enrolled in this program to be able to leverage services while they're in school, because we know they don't have to travel somewhere. It can all be designed right there. And we know that the uptick of actual connecting kid and service will happen when it can happen at school. If we go to the next slide, I can give you a couple examples of where we've seen really cool things happen. Last fall, we got to visit the Eisenberg Elementary School in Newcastle, Delaware. They were seeing a huge behavior problem with students, and it put out a notice for proposals. They wanted to have on this elementary school's campus in the building a school-based health service. Their children's hospital ended up getting this award, and they have literally down the hall from the cafeteria, a clinic that is staffed by the Children's Hospital. They do all the billing and all the sort of back office stuff. There are about 450 students that go to this school. At least half of them live in nearby motels because their families are home insecure. Before the center was in place, they had more than 1,000 incidents of suspensions because of behavior. The first year they had the clinic on place, that 1,000 went to 100, and this past year they've had virtually none. And what that did was it helped kids be in school. It took the burden off the teachers from having to do everything, because they could be the academic leaders and have the mental health providers there who could work with the kids to help them navigate what was whatever going on in their lives. And they were just seeing real success. And when I asked the principal what kept him up at night, he said it was learning loss. You know, these kids are far behind and we wanted to keep catching them up. So he really felt that having this clinic on campus in their building was a significant contribution to children making up for the learning that was lost during the pandemic. We can go to the next slide. Another cool example, what we saw at the Education Service Unit number 3, which is just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. The ESU got a grant from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration of the Department of Health and Human Services that allowed them to place mental health professionals in rural school districts, in rural schools. And I think they were in about 4 different school districts. What happened, what they talked about, the benefit of this was the real partnership between mental health providers and educators. They told a great story of a kindergartner who really didn't have the skills to navigate a full day of school. She could come and do a half an hour and then sort of have challenging behaviors.
Did you find it?
And they just wanted to
Did you find the slide?
help her. And so they were able to use this partnership to help shape the curriculum so this little girl could ultimately, after about a month, be successful in being in the classroom for the full day. They saw a dramatic reduction in the number of students who had suicidal ideation. And it was really a partnership between the mental health providers and the educators on what was going to work for them in their communities. Because these rural districts were so small, they didn't think that they would be able to do it on their own. And so having this support taught them that this was a really valuable staffing structure for them. I think I have one more slide, and I think it's just a thank you. So I'm happy to stop now and look forward to responding to your questions.
Thanks so much, Katie and Bernadine. So I'm sure we will get some questions in the chat, but I have plenty to ask you. So I don't think that we'll want for any of those. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to both of you, because although we are talking about the adults, right, who are in our school buildings, ultimately you are both centering the student experience. And I know that's something that we've been talking a lot about at Schusterman, is what do we need in order for kids to feel like they can be successful. So just really appreciate that framing from both of you. So first, let's start with the educator workforce shortage. So Bernadine, this might start with you. What are some of the elements of promising programs or strategies that funders might want to be looking for when they're looking to support or supplement efforts? And where can federal dollars not be used? Because I know you mentioned something about that at the front.
Sure, thank you. And again, thank you for having us. I love this opportunity. So when we think about the educator shortage, and by the way, whoever can rename or reframe that, I'm all for it, but we're going to talk about it as a shortage at this space now. I think there's an opportunity to really center effective educators as the key to academic recovery, as the key to successful preparation for students, to have well-rounded education for all students. And when I say that, what I mean is ensuring that not only, the educators that are in the buildings have the climate and the conditions that they need to thrive, but we're thinking about that when we work through our educator preparation programs. And so we lean into those who have had, histories of providing and preparing effective educators. I point to HBCUs and think about the unique role that they've played throughout the years in preparing educators, diverse educators, to serve students. The second part that I think a lot about is how do we kind of create conditions in schools where the expectations on the educators align with that preparation and that support. And so things like our full service community school program or other or the school-based mental health service professional program that allows district administrators and school leaders to think differently about the staffing structure of the school so that students have the support they need and the educators in the building are kind of very clearly aligned to their preparation, their work, and all around we have that. So I say that, then I go back to the educator shortage because the numbers don't lie. We need more people in the pipeline to be educators, but we also need to ensure that those who are there feel confident and fully supported, as well as they see a clear next step or a clear pipeline when it comes to advancing through leadership. So quick thoughts. And then your second part of the question is what we can't do that you all can. I think there's a litany of things that we could probably go through, but in this space, I think it's very important to back up the notion that our schools already have what it takes to be successful and to thrive. Our secretary talks about raise the bar as really looking out for promising practices and lifting them up. And so to the degree that we can fund and get behind innovation, get behind what is working, what's family and child centered, that's the work of now. So for me in my role, there are a lot of kind of hurdles, maybe hurdles not the right word, but there are a lot of things that the federal funds are necessary when it comes to innovation. Like there's an evidence threshold, or there might be a limit on how much we can actually use a particular funding stream for new ideas. And I think you all as partners can help leverage that. And so sourcing out what ideas and what innovations our districts, our schools have, because they have the answers. Like the book on how to do education post-pandemic is not on the shelves. It's in the classrooms. It's in communities across our nation. And I think having that perspective and then going from there to find out those things, and then we can back it up and we can work together. I think we talked about it being like a catalyst, like catalyze some of these ideas and funds. So I would put that there, but I'm sure I could have more examples, but we have a limited time on this webinar.
Yeah. And Kelly, if I could just jump in real quickly, one of the things that we have tried this year, and our applications are coming in now, is to revisit the concept of full cost of attendance. For we know that we have shortages of special education teacher in addition to specialized instructional support personnel. And we also know we have an issue that most people in the special ed field look like me, a middle-class white woman. And not that there's anything wrong with a middle-class white woman, but most of our students, or many of our students, are not. And so we really have tried to focus on what can we do to attract more people of color to the special ed side of the world. So we've raised in these applications a concept of asking universities to really look at the full cost of attendance, which means eating, having a roof over your head. Many of people who might consider this as a vocation have small children. You can't leave them at home unattended. And sort of what are those things that need to happen? We've also asked our grantees, our applicants, to not only say that they will try to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, but the specific strategies they intend to employ to do that. It's one thing to say, yes, of course we will, but what do you really, I mean, what are the 10 steps you're going to take to make that real? We are also competing technical assistance center with minority serving institutions, really to try to facilitate that connection between educator preparation programs and HCBUs and tribal universities and Hispanic serving universities. So they may have an education department, but they may not have a special education department. And how can we build their capacity to produce more more scholars who can be educators. We'll see how it goes, but we just know that a lot of these folks don't have consecutive circles of family members who can help them pay their rent if they go to school. And we want people, we've heard just so many stories of graduate students this past year that are going to food banks, that are working a second and third job when they're not supposed to. And I don't think that's the message we want to send to future teachers. Hi, we're going to make you go to school. We're going to make you work really hard, and we're not going to come anywhere close to letting you have a livable wage. I think that is just something that we can no longer tolerate. And so we're looking for strategies where we can incentivize a different financial structure for people who want to enter this field.
Can I add one more to that, if that's okay? Before coming to the Department of Education, I was the director of the Office of Head Start. And one of the things, and Head Start received $1 billion in ARP funds. And one of the things, to Katie's point, we were trying to incentivize, encourage, and really support addressing compensation. And there were limits to how the federal funds could be used for compensation. But what we did find out through talking to our Head Start workforce and others is that there was a perception around what you could use the funding for, it's particularly with the ARP funding. And so we kind of got to this place to realize that, of course, we're nowhere near as much as we need, but we're in a moment, even now, where there's more money than we've had in a while in education, but it's still connected to older rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity, I think, that we work through at the Office of Head Start is to figure out, like, what is the word we need to say so that educators can be compensated. So we put examples in some of our policy guidance that if Target is paying, X amount of dollars, you can benchmark against Target. It doesn't have to benchmark against the other early learning programs. So it's things like that, it's information like that, that we could use to help us think through the different, the student loans and all these other pieces, but would also encourage you to leverage and think about how to use resources to offset those things. Because sometimes I think there's just an acceptance of what we have because it's not clear exactly how to navigate it. And I think that's where these conversations come from. And back to my point of looking at that school as the source of what is the next thing, as an opportunity there. Thank you.
No, it's great. And please continue on whenever you want to. I think we're only going to get great remarks out of both of you, and appreciate, Katie, you raising the cost too. That's a real opportunity. I think where funders can especially work with, say, local HBCUs, local HSIs, talk about scholarship programs. Are there some sort of cost sharing operations or opportunities there? We can be creative, right? Because we can be a little bit more flexible and nimble. And Bernadine, to your point, one place where also funders can really be an asset to their grantee partners is thinking about, well, how can we support you in things like grant writing and navigating some of these challenges around language, or sharing information of what we see on the ground with our colleagues here at the department. So really appreciate that from both of you. So I want to go back to this diversifying the pipeline, because I think that there's so many opportunities when we think about that. And so I saw a few of the names on this call, so I'm sure they're curious about this. As you're thinking about diversifying pipelines and really reaching into our communities, what do you see as the potential promise and potential of challenges of, like, grow your own programs or programs that seek to bring in non-traditional candidates, of which I feel like can be really a boon to both our traditional educator workforce and also other professionals?
So I can start. I think I just saw something this past week, it may have been Pennsylvania, that was looking to pay for paraprofessionals to go to school to get the credentials to become a special education teacher. And I think what we've seen is, if you've got somebody that has the heart, they can be trained to have the skill. It's hard to train the heart and do before. And so I think looking at people who are dedicated to working with kids, who know what it's like to be in a school and to have it not be a financial burden for them to get the extra training to get on the trajectory to become a certified teacher in their state. I think that's a pretty exciting opportunity. So I think looking at who's already in the building is one place where we hope to see some strategies. I think the secretaries highlighted targeting high school kids who may be interested in being teachers and really nurturing them along their journey and helping them understand what being a teacher is like and what training and academic support they need. So I think there are more people out there who would like to be teachers if they could figure out a way for the financial piece, and if they knew that they could come home to their home communities and be a teacher in maybe a school that they went to.
Thanks, Katie. I would add to that, I think it's also important to have mentorship, role models, and other types of exposure. One of the things, my husband, I'll just use him. I was going to try to figure a different way to talk about it, but he started his career as a teacher. And when I was working around superintendent preparation and certification, and he said a remark that sticks with me. It was years ago that I never thought to be a principal or superintendent. I didn't think that that was an option. I was in this educator prep program. Because I was kind of directed there through high school, through whatever the case was. I made that point to say, I think it's important as we're trying to think about how we can partner together around educator diversity is to invest in educators, diverse educators who are in the buildings, who are in the schools, and not only through kind of professional development and reaching, the students. I know, Arizona State has a unique partnership with the local school district where, the high school students actually go and work in an early childhood setting. So it's preparing them, it's giving them experience, the exposure, but also they have, role models that they can look to. And I think the same needs to happen at a bigger scale when we think about diversifying the workforce, not only talking about how to get you into the classroom, but showing you that full scope of like what the career path is, as well as what the impact is. So thinking through that creatively. And I think you get those stories by tapping into diverse educators who are in the building. The other part of that we're doing at the Department of Education, our secretary partnered with the Department of Labor around registered teacher apprenticeships. And so now education or educator prep or teaching is kind of a registered apprenticeshipable, that's a word, it's always hard to say, career, which is an amazing thing to think about. Now you have more people thinking about what it takes to prepare and support educators. And I think that coupled with, the knowledge from our HBCUs, I think is a strategy there. And I think this week I saw actually on the 19th of June, Southern University became the first HBCU that's a part of this national apprenticeship program through their state. And so they're kind of fully plugged in, fully engaged and connected and able to kind of help to share the information. So I think, again, it's role models, mentorships, but also showing like that full path of what it looks like, what the impact is, and what the role looks like in 5 years or 6 years. I think it's no longer enough to say, it's a career and it's compensation. It has to talk about the impact you're going to have on the world. It has to talk about what your trajectory is. And it also has to show you how it fits into the bigger scheme of the work that you have. And if you're not exposed to that, you're not likely to want to pursue it. So I think we have a unique opportunity to lift up those voices and share that information.
I love that. And I would agree. I'm sure many of us who started as teachers in the classroom here too didn't realize that there was a pathway beyond and kind of stumbled through it. And so how wonderful it is to have those opportunities presented to you as a true pipeline. And as reaching back as early as your middle school and high school experiences, there's so much that's happening there. We had a really great question that came from our chat. Thank you so much, or through the Q&A. And I think this is really interesting. And the question is, how are the student and family focused programs and educator prep programs addressing the specific mental well-being needs of our current diverse educators. I think especially as they think about supporting students in the classroom.
I think it's a really good question. I think trying to connect the research that talks about youth well-being as a real factor in academic success, and that if kids are not well, it doesn't matter what the math curriculum of the day is. And one of the things we've seen from some of these partnerships, especially the one I referenced in Nebraska, was when they saw kids struggling, the math teacher was able to pull in one of the mental health professionals, because the kids were all struggling. And rather than doing that mental health, that math curriculum, they did circle time on what it meant to be a friend and kind of got everybody back on track. I think having the permission to recognize where your classroom is and have that be part of your training, that it isn't just grinding through the curriculum and getting to the end of the year, but really helping kids learn and grow and shape that social emotional learning, so that their well-being is intact so that they can learn. So I think it's interdisciplinary training, how to train educators to work with other people and vice versa, and recognizing that kids have been exposed to a lot, and that that our curriculum needs to be nimble enough to recognize where kids are at any moment.
Thanks, Katie. And I would say, I think one of the things we learned hard, like hit us very hard, I think, as a nation, just how important the school climate and culture is in supporting our students as well as our adults. I think, we got to, a point where everybody could fully understand why educator compensation needed to be improved, because you were able to witness the impact or the missing impact of having that loving, caring, knowledgeable educator with your child, or in our communities. And I think that's an open window that we've tried to work together on with our language around how we talk about why some of these programs are important, like school-based mental health programs, like full service community schools. The thought that we want to clear the roles, so not clear the roles, clear the way so that our educators can kind of thrive and serve students. But I think the blind spot or the opportunity that we have now, as we look at the funding that's available, we look at how we're trying to support schools and educators, is thinking about educator well-being absent the direct impact on student achievement. I'll pause there because I feel like we always think we have to apologize or excuse talking about the adults without talking about kids, right? So we say, teachers and educators should feel great in school and they should be well supported. They should have the compensation. That's the sentence. Yeah, we know the data that it also connects to student outcomes, but I think at the end of the day, starting there and really doubling down those efforts is the opportunity. So things like full service community schools, we can do that. We're looking for projects that would put that out there, but it's not necessarily a mainstay of what happens. We do have our Title II programs that we're working to make it more clear on how that can support our educators. And so it's things that we're trying to do, but I think that's the opportunity now. I would go as far as to say, I think the lessons learned from educators who are effective are educators who are fully supported by a strong principal, a building level supervisor, a district that has a culture of wellness that prioritizes the adult wellness as a part of their strategy and their structure for rebuilding.
I appreciate that. And I also think this is a really good example of an opportunity where we as funders also can be working with our local school systems to ask about how we can support educator well-being, whether that's through existing programs, other incentives. There are a lot of things that could be done, but again, that requires an active and ongoing conversation. I know at Schusterman, we've been going deeper in places and that's exciting. But it also uncovers a lot of these other, I think, gaps of where we haven't necessarily been funding before. So I wanted to continue on this mental health kind of thread that we're on right now, and also just ask a little bit about more specific approaches to increasing the pipeline of professional mental health providers. We've talked about some of the non-traditional pathways, we've talked about mentorship, we've talked about different recruitments. But Katie, is there anything else that we haven't covered that really should be top of mind for folks on this call?
I think one is that the Department of Education has $1 billion over the next 5 years, and we've awarded 280 million of it. So there's more to come. But so are other departments. Like I said, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration at HHS has a significant investment in school mental health professionals. So I think the federal government is trying to do everything that it can to increase the pipeline of mental health professionals who are working in schools or working with school-aged youth. And I think the Surgeon General in his advisories, one on loneliness and one on social media, has, I think, made it easier for families to have these conversations about how's it going. And I hope that these are talking about these things, whether it's about youth or about educators, will help reduce the stigma associated with having a mental health concern, and that we're all human and that we all need this help. And so one of the things we're trying to do is increase the supply of school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors. We know that there are huge shortages in those areas. We were just with some kids 2 weeks ago, and they had a school counselor, and we said, so what do you, if we could wave a magic wand, what would you want? She like 2 of me, because she was one person serving 750 kids when the ratio by the association is one person to every 250 kids, which seems like an unreasonable number in and of itself. But that's what the associations say is a reasonable ratio. But I think about kids that have faced trauma that need somebody at school who's a safe place for them to reach out to, who can connect them to the kind of care that they need. And we're just going to need more people. So I think all of us talking about it will help continue to raise it as an area of concern.
Thank you, Katie. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit because we've been talking quite a bit about, I think, engagement with community and opportunities. I wanted to tee up this question around whether or not you see a role for in connection with out-of-school time programs, either in supplementing what educators and schools can do, or as potential pipelines for diversifying these two pipelines. I know I'm especially interested. I'm a longtime board member of the Boys and Girls Clubs, and so we're always thinking about connections with the district and how those things can kind of fit together.
I thank you for that. I could start. I think it's vital and it's necessary. And I also think that a lot of out of school organizations, Katie talked about the heart of it. When I was at Head Start, we called it heart work. Like, you do it because it's in your heart and that's what you do. And I think a lot of the organizations, they're doing this heart work and they're not necessarily being compensated, or they don't necessarily have the resources to go to scale that they would. So you have folks that are working, with 1 or 2 schools in a community, very effective, but kind of getting to scale requires, grant writing and fundraising and all those skills that may not necessarily fit within this focused commitment to do right by the kids sitting in front of them. So I would say that's an area of opportunity to really look at, local nonprofits or national nonprofits that are working and make it easier for them to work and connect with schools. When I first came to the department, I was doing kind of engagement sessions where I would just say, whoever wants to have a conversation, let's just get on Zoom and find 5 people like you, so to speak, so we could talk to. And I had a conversation with some nonprofits from Buffalo, New York. And one of the things we talked a lot about was justice-involved youth and the difficulty of kind of getting into the schools and into those settings to work with those youth. So it was kind of like more access when they weren't in school, but when they need the wraparound support, when they need the after school support, they had difficulties in trying to like leverage those partnerships and the relationships, not because schools were saying no, it's just, it takes a lot of resources to really establish relationships, partnerships, and get grants. And so one of the things that we did through the grant making process is start calling it out, like in our innovative approaches to literacy, which is essentially a book distribution grant that closed a few weeks ago. We called out and said, we want you to focus on underserved students, especially working with organizations and students who are justice involved. And that was kind of like that was an action taken directly from what we were hearing these after school programs say, like, we're here, we're your partners, make it easier for us. And so I think that's important. And then I just cannot say enough, like, people are doing hard work. People that are at the Boys and Girls Club, at the YMCA, I don't even want to start naming them all, but they're doing the hard work. And if we could figure out how to help them get to scale on this effective work, I think that's the opportunity. And then I think, creating conditions where it is an expectation of like a well-rounded education, that you have access to these resources that are most of the time representative and reflective of your community. So you feel good about it too, because they're also a shining star in your community as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we've been doing a lot of investigation on the science of the adolescent brain. We've spent all these years talking about how important the first 5 years are, and the first 5 years are super important. But there's also another big development, time of development, and that's when kids are going from being a kid to being an adolescent. And part of it is they are wired to take risks. That's what the adolescent brain says to them. And why I think out of school, after school programs are so essential is giving kids a safe space, to be supervised as they're taking risks, so they can learn and grow without their caregiver, their parent watching them. And that builds confidence, it builds academic skills, but having that safe space outside of school where you can figure out who you are and what you like to do and who you like to do it with is absolutely essential.
I want to just make a plug, because I'm an alumni of the Upward Bound program, one of the TRIO programs here at the Department of Education. And everything that Katie says, that's the point. Like, you take risks, you figure out what you like, you try things, you all of a sudden realize you like statistics, and who would have thought that from a small rural town? But that's the opportunity. And I think so I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Upward Bound, Virginia State University, Upward Bound.
I love this conversation. I just think it's so indicative of how we can find great educators and supports for students everywhere in our community, and also different pipelines. It's just really exciting. So I think we probably have chance for one last question, because I'm not sure if I've gotten the hook just yet. But Katie and Bernadine, there are a lot of different types of funders on today's call. So just curious about what specific ideas you might offer them who are thinking about how best to supplement the federal dollars and efforts. We have folks from large national, regional, local funders. So good way to close out our day.
I could start. First, shout out to Sheetal from the Department of Education for raising the bar, literally, on how we partner, how we work together, how we think about our work. Like, we don't just think about our work as the mighty federal government and then we leave. Like, no, it's like, how do you sustain our investments, or how do you back up other things that have already happened in communities? So I'm thankful for her for these opportunities to have these conversations and kind of being an ear to the ground for us and thinking about how we organize. But I would say technical assistance from my seat right now. I think technical assistance, one of the things I'm trying to work through, and I think it's a full commitment from our secretary, our agency equity action plan is about is really about our grants, diversifying our peer reviewers, reaching more first-time grantees, reaching areas in our grants that we haven't before. And as we're working through that, and capacity building as well, as we're working through that, it's important for us to have partners that can help prepare potential grantees. So while we're working on kind of this government grant machine, I think starting now, because we have competitions all the time around capacity building, training and technical assistance, thinking about different ways that we can make sure we are, people are well prepared and ready to compete, because they're doing the work. It's just they're doing the hard work. So they're kind of focused on that, and we need some help on that. So I would say that one, and then turn it to you, Katie.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. One is to support minority serving institutions with grant writing capabilities, so that we've got research that Black students that are taught by teachers who graduated from HCBUs have really outstanding academic outcomes. I think we want more HBCUs producing more teachers, because we want those good outcomes. Not every HCBU has a robust grant writing machine at their, within their institution, and how can you all maybe help them with that? The second thing is, I mentioned before, looking at what the true cost of attendance is. And we don't want people that are training to become teachers to have to go to food banks to feed their families. And we don't, I think there's a reality of what it costs to live in lots of places, and whether or not universities and our funding is sufficient to help scholars get through their training and get out at the end and become high quality teachers is something I think we're watching and concerned about, and hoping that we can at least change the conversation, so that being something other than, tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and then having no way of paying it back over the course of your professional time, that just doesn't make any sense. So I think whatever smart thinking your grant writers can do to help change that dynamic would be awesome.
And I know we're at time, but just one tiny thought around planning grants. It takes a lot of resources to stop and write down the great work that superintendents, principals, and school leaders, community organizations are doing. So small, quick, easy to apply for planning grants. Like, hey, you want to work on educator diversity, give me your idea and we'll give you funding to plan that out so that you can be competitive either for federal grant, for other grant. I would just say that because I'm from a small town, Greensville County, and like dynamic superintendent who has all these ideas, but there's also the day-to-day work that has to get done. So I would just make a plug for that. Thank you.
All right, we are right at time. On behalf of the Grantmakers for Education team, we just want to first thank again our panelists, Bernadine and Katie, for joining us today. Thank you, Callie, for moderating this conversation. We appreciate the discussion that's been happening in the chat. I think some contact information has been exchanged. So just thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. We just wanted to close out with a couple of quick announcements and reminders. So the video from today's session will be available in about a week on our website. You can always continue to engage with us via our website, our archive of programs. Feel free to click the QR code or go to that bit.ly link. We've also got some additional programming coming up this summer, including a webinar tomorrow afternoon on intermediaries and seeding community work at the grassroots. So again, thank you so much everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.